with, go ahead. We'll begin the December 14th special meeting about the Cannon Beach Elementary School. I suppose I need approval of an agenda. Just
move.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. That said, we are doing something a little different tonight. Good evening to everybody. Technical problem. I'll be able to read this thing. We're kind of doing more of a presentation tonight. We've got some folks that are going to help us out. Our focus is on the Cannon Beach Elementary School, the old buildings, the property that is Nico's Park. For those who do or do not know this, it's over by Elk Creek, right by the bridge. Our idea is kind of to get on the same page so everybody who is listening can understand where we're all coming from on the future of this property. Tonight is specifically about presentations. We're not quite ready for the hearings. More on that at the end of the program. Suffice to say that in January, we will be doing a set of information gathering hearings. I feel like I don't know what to look at here. Camera's up there and I'm way far away. But the hearings will be for getting the interest of the community, finding out what is important, what is the dream, I'd like to say, about the buildings, kind of specifically, but also the property. So when we talk about what we're going to do there, it will be very beneficial for folks to clarify. I know there are folks that have very specific interests. Example would be a garden or music or weddings or something, some other type of thing. But the entire property is going to be the focus of this, of the Cannon Beach City Council, in creating our goal and identity for that place. There won't be any more public input tonight. That is, we're just going to have some presentations. I keep saying that, but definitely pay attention that in January we will have all the input we can gather. We're going to really do that. So tonight is about some history, about some background, and we'll also have an update on the current situation, and kind of some hints as to where we might be heading as far as the structure of the buildings. I get to start, obviously. That's kind of fun. For those who are interested, the city will be putting all the information that we can gather on a special page on the city website. So you can always look there. Tell your friends and family to look on the website, because whatever we gather in, we'll be posting. I know I have a what I've called a white paper on that site, which has an elaboration of my point of view, rather than getting into that in depth tonight. I also did a little kind of down memory lane from when I was in school on the Chamber's lamp lighting ceremony. I will have city put that on the website also. That's all. My outlook was kind of focused on the old gym, but now that we have the discussion about the classrooms, I've been thinking a lot about that, because they are kind of, we got some potential. It might be expensive, might not be what we want to do, but they do have some potential, and I think we should very much look into those. Rusty, would you give me the map or the next slide? Sure. This is the aerial from Google probably, or whatever, or LiDAR. Yeah. So the brown splotch just below the river, that's the property that we're looking at. You can see the gymnasium and the classrooms down center low. So the brown spot is Nakus Park, and that obviously was in the summer when the grass is dried out. But we now own the entirety. So the whole border that follows the river from the bridge to the mouth of the creek is city property. That is, to me, so valuable in so many ways. It is the first thing you see when you have to make that stop and you're coming into town at the east end of the bridge. So that is unique. It's very rare for a community to have a introductory piece of property that we can do something with that is really special. We have the creek, the border of the creek. We have that special connection between that and the ocean, the beach. We have immediate access to the beach. We have up in the upper left-hand corner of the property, the welcoming man that was the totem that we put up a while ago with the help of some neighbors. That was, we'll hear from them later this presentation. I was, just as a little aside, this last winter we had a issue with the welcoming man. Somebody found the arm. We had it replaced within a day or two. Public Works did an excellent job getting the arm a little stiffer. So now when kids hang on it for their picture, it's not as in danger. That's kind of fun. Okay, that's my homespun kind of entry. A couple more items that I wanted to mention is those who are aware of the food pantry. That is going to stay the food pantry for all the immediate future that I know of. We are not focusing on changing the food pantry in any way whatsoever in this discussion. That will be a future discussion. That building is in need of help, but right now it works. So we're not going to touch that. We're going to kind of focus on the gym, the old classrooms, and the property in our gathering of information. Okay, I think I'll move from there to some history. And I would like to introduce, I need my glasses for this. Dr. Doug Ewer is a historical specialist and a research professor at Portland State University. Doug's presentation on the history of the site reflects several years of research as part of a joint effort by the National Park Service and Portland State University. Doug is a lifetime local and sits on the Oregon State Parks Commission for the Pacific Coast. Doug, would you be welcome to do your thing? Thank you.
Great to see you, Mayor Sam and the council, and all of you who are calling in. It's good to see some of you. I haven't seen quite a few of you since the COVID situation started, but I will see if I can share my screen here. And there we go. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Right. So I'm going to do kind of a quick overview here, recognizing we don't have a lot of time for discussion and questions, but we'll get to those eventually. I just want to provide some background again on what we've been documenting over the years at the site and share some of the high points with you all as background for the larger conversation. But as I think many of you appreciate, of course, this Cannon Beach Elementary School site was the historical site of a village of Nehalem people primarily. And in fact, though, it is a place of national and even international significance. This site is known as part of one of the places visited during the Lewis and Clark expedition, point of contact between Native people and the Lewis and Clark expedition. This is a very fanciful painting suggesting those points of contact in this part of the world. But this was in some ways the one of the westernmost terminal points of that expedition, which continues to be of historical importance and interest nationally and internationally. And in the course of that visit, which I won't belabor here, but the high points are that, of course, people with the Lewis and Clark expedition hiked over Tillamook Head and came down to the mouth of what was dubbed at that moment Ecola, or Whale Creek, Ecola being the term for whale in Chinook Wawa, the Chinook language. And they record a village site right here at the mouth of Ecola Creek, the precursor to modern day Cannon Beach, in this place, which they recorded as the no-cost tribe of the Tillamook Nation. That we don't know exactly what that name means actually, but the closest we can come in the Nehalem Tillamook language is Nakost, which means place where the tide rushes out. And there are different reasons why that name would have stuck, one of which may relate actually to a tsunami story relating to the site. But we know the place was visited by the members of the expedition, and they record a substantial community there, both resident but also visiting, who are excited about the whale being here and gathering whale blubber. And they record that they are encountering these people in plank houses with doors at each end, 2 fireplaces in a longhouse, essentially, that several people lived in. And we know what these look like because while that particular structure was not ever photographed, those particular structures that were here weren't photographed or painted, we have paintings of similar buildings from very nearby and in other cultural contexts that are the same, where you have a central fireplace or 2 in the middle that's excavated out, and then sleeping quarters and storage areas around the perimeter and kind of an excavated foundation. And people lived, whole extended families would live in these houses. So you might have 20, 25 people in any one structure. So when we hear about 5 buildings here, we know that at that moment, there may have been 100, 150 people living in this community at its maximum occupancy. And there's some reason to believe it could have even been a larger settlement prior to their arrival. So a substantial community centered at the mouth of Ecola Creek. And honestly, the population of non-native Cannon Beach that emerged after the epidemics and other things cleared native people out of this area doesn't rebound to that number for quite a few decades until we get into the 20th century, which is something we're thinking about as well. There's only a brief period of time where there is not really much of a human community here. And while this is not a picture of Ecola Creek, it could well be. This is actually from the Quinault River, where a number of Clatsop and Nehalem people from this part of the world ended up at Quinault. But this scene is very much like what you might see here. We know that the people at this village would ferry people across during high water in canoes. We know that it was also a fairly important place, a stopover point for people traveling north and south, especially as they would travel to the mouth of the Columbia to go to the large trade centers that were hosted by the Chinook and Clatsop people. And so paddling, if you can imagine, by hand around with a canoe around Tillamook Head is an arduous journey, even under good conditions. And so people would often rest here as they prepared to make that journey going north, and they would also stop here as they would head south, recuperating after that travel. And so really from very deep time, we can see that Cannon Beach was a place that hosted visitors, hosted people from out of town who were passing through, maybe wanting to trade, people interacting who were of different backgrounds, cultural traditions, and so on. And this was really the hub of that at Cannon Beach at the mouth of Ecola Creek. So when we think about what life was like here, a reasonable way to get a good mental picture of this is to go to the middle of Seaside and stare at the wall of the hardware store in downtown, where you have this mural that was made with some tribal input. And we would have seen something kind of like similar to this scene at the mouth of Ecola Creek prior to European contact, just looking at Tillamook Head from the other side. So we have a number of other lines of evidence. I won't get into much detail today about the life in this village, but we know that the lower part of Ecola Creek was called Neshetskoin, place with lots of these, silverweed, which have edible roots. There appears to have been a lot of marsh resource use in what became the city and behind the city, and maybe even some fish wares and other fishing techniques being used on the creek, at the mouth of the creek. But not only was this a place in an abstract sense that was occupied by native people, we actually know the names of some of the people who live there and the families associated with this place. So we have here Kashtua Maggie Adams, who was born here in Cannon Beach and ultimately became the kind of the matriarch of the Garibaldi community, sort of a remnant settlement in the clear into the 1930s. And Nancy Gervais, or Jervis, who was actually one of the last people living in the village before it was finally more or less abandoned. And so we know that these people were here through a number of different lines of archival sources, including, for example, journals by people like Preston Gillette, who visited here in 1863 and found that there was in all of Cannon Beach one family living here, and they were a native family living in what was left of that village as far as we can tell. So I won't read the whole thing, but they reached Elk Creek, had lunch with Ed Jarvis, Edouard Gervais in the language of his Quebecois father, a half-breed who lives in an Indian hut, and his wife, Nehalem woman, Nislush, Nancy Jervis. They had elk together. They took a nice walk down the beach. They were impressed by the mountains of rock, like magnificent pyramids standing in the sea. So a typical day at Cannon Beach in the 1860s, with what was left of the native community still residing here. Not long after that, these families move away. In fact, the Gervais family move up to Seaside and begin to do things like work in the early hotels, the first hotels of Seaside. But the family seem to have still used this occasionally as a campsite, stopover point, but it begins to get overgrown with brush, sand blows in, non-native settlers move into the area and begin encroaching on that site until finally by around 1892, the reoccupation is pretty complete. There's still native trails by the time that this is drawn in the late 19th century. And so there's still some remnants of traditional native settlement and occupation. So by the 1930s, when this is taken, here we have, well, it's roughly the Coaster Theater, and the Chamber building is somewhere out in the swamp here. And you can see the beginnings here of the institutional use of the property, and sand is blowing in and covering up parts of the old village site. And in fact, we have some fill material that's ultimately dropped there and more accumulates over time. So we end up with a fill along the edge and fill kind of occupying a lot of that site. By this point, the native community is more or less no longer camping here, but it continues to be a stopover place for tribal people continuing to visit the site, recognizing its historical significance, teaching young people about the historical importance of the place, cultural values relating to it. So here we have the great grandson of Kashtawa, who was born there, Joe Scoville. We have the family of Dick Bash, who's going to speak, I think, later. And then we have Guy Capolman, former chairman of the Quinault Indian Nation, who is also of some Clatsop and Nehalem descent, who carved this pole with his son in collaboration with local tribal people to commemorate that history and continue to remind us that this place has that importance. So we would also expect that there would be some, maybe a possible archaeological signature of all this activity and human use and occupation. So over the last few years, the National Park Service, Portland State University, and occasionally some tribes and tribal organizations have stepped in to see what can be determined. So here we have myself and actually Sean Steinmetz from the Umatilla tribe, although they're not affiliated with this, but he's a specialist in using this thing, which is a ground penetrating radar device. It looks like we were just mowing the lawn that day. That's a retrofitted lawnmower system that is designed to actually send radar signals below the surface of the earth to see what we can find. And so we have field schools out on the site and visiting a number of places around the Ecola Creek estuary. and also checking out different transects around the property and vicinity with a magnetometer. This allows us to see magnetic anomalies under the surface of the ground, and so we can see if there are unusual things there. And so I'm not at liberty to talk a lot about what we've seen so far, and I think we will learn more in due course. And I could say too that anybody who wants to visit the site to poke around looking for any archaeological materials should know that that is wildly illegal and they shouldn't be digging. There is no treasure there. If there is, I guess I can say there is a treasure of a kind, and that treasure is that when we look below the surface, I can say that we see evidence of compacted soil, sometimes in large rectangular areas that are kind of the size of a room, where thousands upon thousands of footsteps have occurred over generations. And the treasure is that we can see that many people were there using the place, walking around, and that's still visible to us to this day. So that's pretty amazing. We had hoped to go back in 2019 to do a more detailed investigation. The funding arrived just a few days late to actually mobilize. We had planned in 2020 to go out and investigate again with involvement of the Park Service and other entities, and COVID-19 eliminated that. So we're hoping as soon as COVID lifts that we'll be able to get out and actually provide more information about the deeper cultural and historical significance of the site, which again, while this is fascinating background, and for me personally, and I imagine some of you have a lot of questions as well. I hope that sometime we can actually have another event where we can maybe answer some more of those questions. But I think this all underscores the fact that this place is of unique significance. It is a treasure of a kind that we have in our own backyard. And while this may create some modest limitations on what can be done on the property, also opens up a world of possibilities as we recognize that we have a historical site of national significance, a place that is of enduring importance to tribal people, and a place where we may even have some footprints, some remnant sign that people were here that we can actually see. So anyway, with that, I thank you very much for your time, and look forward to hearing what the other speakers have to say. Anyway, good seeing you all.
Good seeing you, Doug, and thank you very much for this. I would like to let everybody know that Doug is local. Doug will be available for us during this process. We will definitely be in touch. His connections with BSU and Oregon State Parks is invaluable. So thank you very much, Doug. At that, I want to go on to our next guest. Dick has been coordinating with the City of Cannon Beach for many years to help this project and commemorate the CB Elementary School site. Dick is a tribal member of both Clatsop and Nehalem descent, is working with Clatsop, Nehalem, and Siletz communities in continuing to help preserve the memory of Clatsop and Nehalem culture and to protect the integrity of cultural sites such as Negus on the northern coast. Dick is a retired tribal liaison for the National Park Service and has offered to say a few words this evening to help us better understand the meaning of Negus to the tribal community. Dick, welcome. Oops, hang on. Got to unmute somewhere.
There we go.
There we go.
Yay.
Hey, well, it's good to see you. Some familiar faces behind masks, but nonetheless, it's nice to be in your company. I would, first of all, like to say that the commitment of Cannon Beach to honoring that place is very near and dear. I know to my heart. For years, we've been meeting and discussing different options for the site, and I'm really happy to be here and see you continuing to want to get information and hopefully do what's right for the spirit of that place that we call Nakoofs. I don't know if you caught it, but in Doug's presentation, there was a picture of the back of my head when I was about 6 or 7 years old at the playground at the old school. And it was during the sesquicentennial of the Lewis and Clark Bicentennial, which shows, which shows how old I am, but it also helps to illustrate the significance of the site, the village site. It, as Doug mentioned, it was visited by Clark and some of the other members of the expedition, including Secretary. And that back of my head was at a gathering there on the playground or at the school in the gym and classrooms of people honoring, commemorating the 150th anniversary of the expedition being there. It was, and that illustrates how, once again, it was not only used for centuries and centuries and generation after generation of tribal members as a place where life really did exist, where day-to-day living happened, but right on through 1955, continuing on to today, how it's a gathering place for many age groups and for a variety of different events, tribal events. We have had fireplace gatherings. My family have jumped in and cleansed, done some cleansing in the creek, spiritual work. It is really continued to be quite an active place for tribal members. Descendants of Nancy Gervais gather at the site quietly and celebrate the intact village beneath the sand, basically. It is not everywhere you can stand in where your ancestors stood generations ago, knowing that that village site and those histories are right there. It is a rare happening, I guess you would say. The in the Lewis and Clark world, you know, that those guys trips across the country, got all the way out here and then turned around and went back. Well, that site is one of very few, a handful of sites where people can actually stand and say Lewis or Clark was here. Clark and the expedition members were right here. And read the journals and imagine what was going on. And so speaking to Doug's point about it being nationally and internationally an important site, that it is. And you know, how I've seen it is that both tribal people and Lewis and Clark enthusiasts can stand in the same place and treasure the same feelings, I guess. Let's see. That's a lot of my personal affiliation. Other than, not only did we gather there as a family during my whole life for picnics and mussel chowder, and those things. When I went away, grew up, I thought I had grown up, went to the University of Oregon, graduated, and decided I needed to get back home. Where did I end up living? At 3rd and Antler. I you know, and that's part of the village site as well. And I didn't realize it for a long time, but that really was coming home. And I lived there for a while, and once I found out what was there, I felt even more secure, I guess, for moving home and living at that spot. Well, I really appreciate you and all that you're doing. And those of you that I've worked with in the past when the tribe was going to purchase the property, I think you know where I come from. And hopefully you're able to know where the tribe has come from. And education is the important priority for the tribe. And those facilities are made obviously for education, community gatherings of all types. So thank you very much for allowing myself and Doug to talk and share a little bit about history from many perspectives.
Thank you very much, Dick. I appreciate a fellow alum. I had to
Hey,
do
I used to be your bus driver.
I had to do the math. I was in the same playground about 10 years later. So,
Is that right?
yep, that's fun.
Yep.
And thank you for also maintaining contact, because we have been working on this for quite some time, you and I and others. So we're forging ahead.
I appreciate
Okay.
it.
Go ahead.
I appreciate the way you're forging ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. At that point, it's now a really good time for us to kind of get a picture of where we're at. And Bruce is going to help us. So our city manager, Bruce St. Dennis, is going to talk about the results of a study that we did, an engineering study. Document the conditions of the two buildings on the property, as well as some of the costs and stuff. So Bruce, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rusty, would you pull up slide 3? Oh, you already got it. Great. Thank you. ZCS, an architectural and engineering firm, was asked to review the conditions of the classroom and the gymnasium. They were to use the information to document what physical problems were identified and determine what work was needed in the 70-year-old buildings to get them to meet current codes. They were also to provide an opinion of the likely cost of the work. A full copy of the ZCS report is available on the website on the Cannon Beach Elementary or CBE webpage. What they were asked to do was take a look at the two buildings that are on the site. Their study did not go into the grounds, anything else, but it was just to find out what the conditions were. And so that's what's included. Russ, if you go to slide 5. What is not included? Any furnishings, site improvements, including outdoor exhibits and gardens, parking, modifications to the food pantry facilities. None of those things are included in the estimate. So when we start talking about the numbers we have, it's for the two buildings. The ZCS report was split into 4 sections that are somewhat logical when looking at a project of this nature. Level 1, what will it cost to stabilize the structures? Examples include roof and wall leaks, broken windows, etc. Level 2, what will it take to bring the buildings up to code so that we can enter the building? These things would include a working water and wastewater system and appropriate power, for example. Level 3 is the base level for a community center. This takes the building that we met code in level 2 to the point that you're able to use it for community center functions. Level 4 provides a high quality, versatile meeting and community center. In other words, it would be capable of hosting large and small events, concerts, and sports activities. The costs shown include what we call in construction our hard costs, and that would be the bricks and mortar, and also what are known as soft costs, which are the design, the contingencies, insurance, etc. So if we look at level 1, which is what will it cost to stabilize the structures, classrooms was approximately $13,000, and the gym $9,500. And again, that's to stop the leaks, that sort of thing, for a total of $23,000. Level 2, what would it take to bring the buildings up to code? You can see that the classrooms, $306,000, the gym, $104,000, and that's for a total of $410,000. Before we go further, there's something critical I want to point out. The costs in the report for the 4 phases are not cumulative. In other words, the price for level 2 includes the cost to complete the work in level 1. This goes for level 3 costs, which will include levels 1 and level 2, and level 4, which would include all 3 previous levels. So when we're talking about these numbers, every time you go up a step, the previous step is included in the new number. You'll be able to, Russ, if you go to level 3, good. You can see that some big costs occur in level 3, including accessible restrooms, seismic resiliency, removal and reconstruction of the offices at the north end of the gym, a sound system, and a roof replacement in the gym. So the costs here go up significantly. And so the classrooms is like $1.163 million, and the gym is $2.570 million for a total of $3,733,000. That to me is not surprising. You have wood buildings that are 70 years old that have not been maintained for a long time. The ZCS says that we are lucky that the bones of the buildings are good. They are, it's possible to upgrade them and have them last another many, many years. So just gave you the level 3. And now the level 4 is the one that gets you into a high quality, versatile meeting and community center. The classroom, the total would be roughly 1.2 million, and the gym is roughly 2.8 million, for a total of $3.998 million for the 2 buildings. And again, I want to say it's not a true representation of the project cost. That's the representation of the building cost. Now, remember I said that the ZCS report only addressed the conditions in the 2 buildings. I want to go back and talk about what's not included, again, in those estimates. Slide 8. Any furnishings that are significant furnishings that we would need. For example, the cost of renovating the gym is already included, but if we wanted to have large gatherings, large concerts, that sort of thing, we would need the furnishings for that to work. Site improvements like outdoor exhibits and gardens. There's been a lot of things talked about what we could do is representing the life that was there many, many years ago, exhibits, that sort of thing. Those are not included. And modification to the food pantry facilities. And always in a renovation project, any really big surprises. But we think that we've found most of those. Let's see, go to slide 9. I want to say that we're very early in the project, so there's a lot yet to be decided. If somebody says, well, they don't know what they're talking about, they probably are somewhat correct. But we don't have all the answers yet, and the final cost depends on what we do. And what we do will depend on the input that you give the council when we get to January and do those 4 meetings. Go slide 10. With the cost of the project, people might say, why don't, why not start new? Why not just take the buildings down? And as Dr. Dewar told us, this place has an incredibly rich history and is of great historical importance. That means new construction would be very disruptive to the site. So out of respect for the history of the location and the people that were before us, it is our goal to work with authorities to minimize any disruption to the remaining artifacts. We will be as close to zero impact as we can in our planning. Next one, Marcy, go to slide 11, I think. Now we get to start talking about money. There are several ways to move forward with a project of this size. 5 possibilities are using funds from the general fund. And when you take money from the general fund, that's the general taxes, you either need to create more taxes or you have to offset the cost by reducing costs someplace else. That's what happens when you're dealing from a general fund. You could do it pay as you go. As you get money comes in, you can go ahead and do something. The third is grants. I think that there will be the possibility of some grants, but they're generally going to be specific. But we will pursue those to as far as we can. The next is donations. This is an important project. There's a lot of interest in what we're doing here. And so there might be people that would come forward and say, we would like to help you with this. And another thing is volunteer efforts. The fact that we've got a vibrant local population that has a great interest, has great experiences, there might be some ability to work with that particular branch. So if you go to 12. We also have the potential for a source of project funding, which would come from the city's portion of the 1% TLT, which is the tourism lodging tax that the county collects now to fund operations for the new jail. They return 70% of what they collect to the city for tourism purposes. It is possible it could be used to pay the debt service on any construction loans. And actually possibly have some funds left over for operational costs. So slide 13. The TLT, or the tourism lodging tax funds, must be used for tourism uses. Those funds, when they come to the city, they're not possible to put into the general fund for our general operations, nor can they be used to fix the utility system. They have to be used for tourism facilities or for other tourism uses. So slide 14. How could this project qualify as a tourism-related facility? The project qualifies because it potentially can provide meeting space for hotels to make them more competitive in trying to bring in not conventions, but smaller conferences during the off-season. But I think that it's been made very clear by both Doug and Dick that the grounds have a high historical tourism value, and entertainment events in the gym can attract tourists. So I think that it is a viable funding source if we choose to go in that way, and I just wanted to mention that. So with that, I'll turn things back over to our mayor.
Thanks, Bruce. What's next? Well, that's kind of the whole idea of this thing is what are we going to do? So our plan, as stated at the beginning of this thing, is to really start focusing next month. We'll get through the holidays. We'll start focusing with what we want to see. Actually, what we want to hear is input, as much possible input that the entire community can give us. And you can do this in many ways. We're wishing for folks to do the meetings. The meetings will be Zoom. We can line people up, and we've got some folks who have special interest. A good example would be Oregon Parks, just because They have a vested interest in the history of our beach and the Lewis and Clark connection. We have Fort Clatsop up at the north end of the county, and this is always a good teaching thing, as Doug has taught us. So we have other interests within the community, the History Center, obviously. Even folks like the library and whoever, we will invite them to make some direct comments to see how they might wish and dream about how they could use this facility. It becomes then a challenge because we're going to have a whole bunch of fun information. People are going to throw at us great ideas, wild ideas. And our job as the city council would be to cull those down and figure out how we can incorporate as many dreams as possible and still make this a viable project. Next slide. Those you will see are the dates of the January meetings. So on the 7th at 5:30, look for the Zoom on the city website. You can charge right in that way. You can send us letters or emails. We are compiling those into a document that we can then study and compare and take notes and do all that kind of stuff. So the Saturday, Wednesday, and Saturday meetings, we've tried to scatter things around so those folks who work have a chance to fit this within their schedule. That's our hope. We've got a morning one. Which one's the morning one? The
9 o'clock.
Saturday the 16th.
Saturday.
That's 9 a.m. That should be.
Mhm.
So that's the Saturday the 16th for those folks who are morning people. So after that, after we have gathered all this stuff, we will do some public discussions amongst ourselves. Those will be presented just like this one. You'll be able to listen in. We will come up with some sort of concept and then we'll throw it back at you because we want input again. So don't think this is going to be decided tomorrow. We've got some time and we're going to do this as judiciously as possible, but also as quickly as possible because we need to get something going on in the buildings that are leaking. And I know Public Works is working on fixing that up a little bit right now. So that said, unless the council has any other comments they would like to make, what else we got here? What's next? Yeah, the decision making. We're wrapped up. Council, do you have any comments?
Exciting times coming.
Yep.
Good.
Did you suggest the last meeting that people sign up if they want to speak at these meetings? Did you want to do that?
We're still trying to work that out. It's possible that we will kind of set appointments for people to talk at certain meetings because it's hard to, you can't really raise your hand like you can in a room like on Zoom. So we're trying to see if there's an easier way for that to happen. And we will have that information well before the 7th.
I want to address the folks that are online tonight. I believe we have about 20
24.
attendees that are listening. I want you to help us talk this up with your friends and neighbors, family, whoever, people you run into on the street corner, the post office. Talk it up because we want input. This is a very difficult process in this community, is to get people aware of what the city is doing. I don't know why, but it is. So please talk it up and let people know that we were having several meetings in January and to pay attention. At that, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, council. We will stay in touch. Bye now. We are adjourned.
All right.
On Monday at 10 a.m. So people check the website for Zoom link, and we hope to see you at 10 a.m.